Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fraternity Foodie. This is Mike Eilon with Greek University, and we call these segments Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like food that brings people together. So make sure that you stay to the end of this interview because I know our guest has some really exciting food options in Southern Jersey. And our guest today is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. This is Joe Thompson. He is the Assistant Director of Student Development at Stockton University in New Jersey. Welcome, Joe Thompson.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's always great to see you. Let's jump right into this interview. So the first question that I have for you is, what made you decide on Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania for your undergraduate experience?
Well, I think anybody that has either been to Susquehanna or went to Susquehanna would tell you that the second you walk on that campus, you just see how beautiful it is. I had no idea where I wanted to go to school, but when I was doing lots and lots of campus visits with my parents in high school, we stepped onto that campus. I had never heard of it before. My mom kind of forced me to go to all these different schools that she helped me find. The second we walked on that campus, it's such an inviting place, welcoming place. There were people saying hi to me walking down the sidewalk. Obviously, I didn't know anybody. And it's just so beautiful in terms of the buildings and the landscapes and stuff like that. And it's in the middle of central Pennsylvania, in the middle of farmland. It's just a nice, beautiful, open area. And I kind of fell in love with it for that reason, first and foremost. I went to school to major in history and secondary education because I was going to be a social studies teacher. That obviously didn't pan out. That's not what I ended up doing. Hence why I'm here today. But, there was a teacher that I looked up to in high school who actually was a social studies teacher who graduated from there as well and kind of said, hey, you should also check out the school. So that was definitely one of the other reasons why we visit there. And you know what? I don't regret it for a second. That was the best decision, that I made at that point in my life because I love that school tremendously and ended up going back there to work. So.
Yeah, that worked out really well. It's interesting that they're in the Northeast and you had people on campus saying hi to you out of nowhere that maybe didn't even know who you were. That's one of the things about the Northeast that, really frustrated me. And ultimately, obviously, I moved to Nashville, and now everybody says hi to you. Literally, as you're driving into the development, people are waving at you on the way in. I'm like, I've never met you before, but hey. And that just makes such a difference in terms of your daily mood, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, and when you were there at Susquehanna, you obviously chose Phi Mu Delta. I know how important Phi Mu Delta is to you as a fraternity. So what made you choose Phi Mu Delta?
So that's actually a funny story. So when I was an undergrad, I had no intention whatsoever of joining a fraternity. It was the last thing on my mind. I was involved on campus in lots of different things. So there were definitely, friends of mine that were joining fraternities that may have tried to recruit me here and there. But I always told them I was not interested. It was not something that I wanted to do. But a lot of that had to do with my perceptions of what, fraternities did, which were not necessarily the right perceptions. But so the funny part of the story is I want to say it was the end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year. The director of student activities at the time said to me, hey, Joe, would you be willing to take a meeting with the executive director of this fraternity? And my initial feeling was no, I don't want to do that. But she's somebody I looked up to, and I worked very closely with her with all my involvement on campus. I was an orientation leader and all these things. So, if she's going to ask me to take this meeting, I'm going to take the meeting. So I remember going into the bottom floor of our campus center at Susquehanna and walking into this room, and this gentleman, gets up out of the chair and shakes my hand and introduces himself. And that man was Tom Murphy from Phi Mu Delta Fraternity. And really, he just spent the first 15 minutes just trying to get to know me. He was talking to me about what my experiences were like at Susquehanna. Fun thing about that was he is a graduate of Susquehanna himself. So it was his chapter that he was trying to bring back to SU. But really what got me to change my mind about joining a fraternity was that Tom's approach to talking to me to get me interested in joining a fraternity, really restarting a fraternity, because he was there to bring Phi Mu Delta back to Susquehanna, was to basically ask me, what is it that I wanted to get out of my college experience that I wasn't necessarily getting? What were my goals in life? Where I wanted to be in 5 years, where I saw myself in 10 years. And it really made that connection with me about what, an organization could do to help support those goals. And I don't remember if in that meeting, I said yes right then and there, or if I waited until the next morning, but it was pretty quick that I told him that I was in. And it had so much more to do with just my conversation with him and him having an understanding, I think, of what I as a college student was looking for than it did what actual organization it was. And, as I said, it's, going to Susquehanna was one of the best decisions of my life. Joining Phi Mu Delta was one of the best decisions of my life. And I can't imagine my life being different than it is now, because it is such an integral part of what I do, being a fraternity and sorority advisor, and I'm on the national board of Phi Mu Delta now. So, fast forward, it's kind of a funny story. But really it was that relationship that I had built with Tom in that short period of time. And then once I actually signed on to join and help restart the chapter, just that relationship building, I knew I was in the right place. I knew that I made the right decision and joined the right organization. And it's just been such an amazing experience working with Phi Mu Delta and being a part of that brotherhood.
Yeah, that is a textbook lesson on recruitment that Joe Thompson just dropped on you. I mean, Tom Murphy, I can't say enough good things about him. He's also just an incredible fraternity man, and his contributions and his legacy is going to last, a long, long time. But I mean, him going out and asking you, what is it that you're not currently getting out of this college experience? What else are you looking for that you're not getting? That one question framed up, I'm sure, literally, a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour conversation. And that conversation made all the difference in the world. And I hope that fraternity and sorority members are listening to that and really implement that going forward, because that's ultimately how you convert people who have preconceived ideas and preconceived notions about what they think fraternity and sorority is about, and really reframes it and actually shows them how the fraternity and sorority experience will help them get what it is that they want out of the experience. That's fantastic. And while you were getting your master's degree at Rutgers in college student affairs, I know that you were a grad assistant at Drexel in Philadelphia. So what were your impressions of Greek life at Drexel, and how did that compare to what you were accustomed to at Susquehanna?
Sure. Yeah. So that was also a wonderful experience that I'm so glad that I got to have when I was in grad school. So when I went to Drexel, it was in between my 2 years of my master's program at Rutgers. I had not had the opportunity to work in the fraternity and sorority life office at Rutgers. I had a different graduate assistantship. So I really wanted to have the opportunity to work with Greek life somewhere. As you know, during the summer, that can be very difficult. But luckily, Drexel is on the quarter system. So they have classes throughout the entire year. I had the pleasure of going to Drexel and working with Katie Zimolinsky, who was Katie Peoples at the time, and Natalie Shack. So that was a wonderful experience. Natalie and I have actually become very good friends since then, and I always tend to visit her in Philadelphia and chat with her. SU was a very small, secluded school in the middle of central Pennsylvania farmland. And Drexel is in the middle of Philadelphia. It's in the middle of the city. They had many more chapters than Susquehanna. Susquehanna, I think, as an undergrad, we had 10 chapters there. But my experience at both schools obviously was very positive. My experience at Drexel taught me a lot. That was the first time really getting to learn the inner workings of, Panhellenic sororities in particular. I became close to the Panhellenic president there at the time, who was Melissa Riley, who ended up working for DPhi after she graduated. Just had a lot of different experiences than just being in an IFC fraternity on my campus as an undergrad. I think the main difference between the two experiences, between the two communities, is that the sheer size of Drexel. Practices and policies are a bit different because of that. Because they're in a city, the way that did things were kind of different as well. Those are not things that you typically think about a lot as an undergrad, especially, but even when you're going into higher education, working with fraternities and sororities, necessarily how housing and whether you're in a city or in a rural area really affects how you view working with chapters from a policy and procedure standpoint, and the different things that you need to put in place can really be affected by those factors. I think at Drexel, Natalie and Katie were working a lot more with the community than I had experienced as an undergrad. My fraternity and sorority advisor at Susquehanna, being a small school, had a lot of hats. So she's a director of student activities. So she was involved in almost everything student leadership wise. Whereas at Drexel, Natalie and Katie were the Greek advisors, right? So their whole job was pretty much working with the fraternities and sororities. And that makes a huge difference too, because they're focusing all their time on the community. And so those were the two, I think, big differences that I saw, and really gave me a lot of great perspective going into this field and understanding what kind of things I needed to think about wherever I ended up going.
Yeah, that's a great discussion. I think for students that are considering different options, which university they want to go to, what kind of an experience they want, and also for administrators that are considering different fraternity and sorority communities, those are all things that I think need to go into the calculus of, is this a good fit for me, et cetera. So that's wonderful stuff. Now, you worked at Susquehanna University as their Greek life coordinator, and then eventually you became the assistant director of student development at Stockton in New Jersey. And in the 6 years that you've been there at Stockton, I've noticed that the Greek life population has grown by leaps and bounds while you've been there. So everybody wants to know, what's the reason why you're seeing all of this growth in terms of the fraternity and sorority community at Stockton? How's that happening?
Yeah. No, it's been great. Obviously, it's it's great to see more students involved, and it's definitely job security for me. I think one reason for that is I have simply supported our student population in creating new experiences at Stockton. In 6 years that I've been here, we have started 8 chapters. 8 chapters in 6 years is a lot, I guess. But students are interested in joining fraternities and sororities. I want to give them that opportunity. So whether that's joining one of our groups that's already existing, or it's something new that they can offer to the campus and something different for our students, let's bring a new organization on. And I think that's important. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think my approach to working with students has given them the support they need to help grow their chapter membership. So just individually within their chapters. For instance, when I arrived here in 2013, Panhellenic sororities averaged around, I want to say total was 65 members each. Now total is over 105 members. And that's with 2 additional Panhellenic sororities, right? So a lot of our growth in terms of overall membership has been within the Panhellenic sorority community. But basically where that comes from is I've just been very hands-on with them, providing them a lot more training and support than I think they were used to prior to that. And some of it was convincing them that growth was a good thing. Sometimes you go on communities and, chapter size is 60 and they're like, well, this feels like a good number. We don't really want to grow any more than this. It's so the first part is actually convincing them that growth is good. And, you could still be a healthy, strong chapter with great sisterhood or brotherhood, even if you're 100 members. You just kind of have to work with them to make sure they know how to do that successfully. So it was working with them to do those things. Our average size for IFC fraternities have gone up, I want to say, by 8 members. So there's been growth there. That's pretty substantial. And then our culturally based organizations within our UCGC and MPHC have ebbed and flowed, but we've had some pretty good numbers throughout the years. But I think at the end of the day, in regards to my approach to advising the community, I focus a lot on individual student development and learning, which I think translates well into unaffiliated students seeing the value in fraternity and sorority membership. So I think what's different with how I advise fraternities and sororities versus maybe some other campuses, because I've had this conversation with colleagues at different schools, our annual evaluation system, accreditation system, whatever other schools call it, for our chapters at Stockton focuses basically on 14 learning outcome areas that chapters basically create goals around, focusing less on chapter operations and more on value for individual members. So how do I explain that? As an employee of the university, my job, obviously, I work for the university. So my job is to help every student I come in contact with be successful and graduate, right? So I kind of look at it from that framework. So my end goal, even when evaluating fraternity and sorority chapters, is how are fraternity and sororities acting as vehicles to support the mission of the university, which is student learning, which is retention, which is students graduating in 4 years, being retained, being successful students and moving on. So my framework is really individual student focused. So when I'm talking to chapters about whatever subject matter it might be, even if we are talking, at a macro level about chapter operations, it's really coming down to what are your individual chapter members learning out of this experience? And how are you assessing that to show the university that these individual members are learning this, are developing in their leadership, right? So it's become a lot more qualitative than quantitative. We're still collecting service hours and philanthropy dollars and seeing what those numbers are, but that's become less important with the approach we've taken. But I think by doing that, and the students understanding that, it helps in recruitment. It helps in, talking about what fraternity and sorority life is about, because it then translates to students understanding that, if I join a fraternity and sorority, this is what I'm going to individually as a student here get out of this experience. And I think that has been a big part of it, where I have found success and our students have found success, and I've been really happy with our approach.
I love your approach, and you're a huge asset for Stockton. So kudos to you, and I'm sure other campuses are trying to figure out how do they replicate that on their campus. And I love to see just the excitement that is around Greek life on your campus. You see really engaged students, and ultimately, I think that is what makes you such a good asset for the university. The other thing that I think that is interesting about the students that are in particular at Stockton that I've noticed is that the students, they all seem to be very driven by community service, and also to a certain extent fighting some of the stereotypes that we typically associate with Greek life around the country. I certainly saw that when I first got involved with the Sigma Pi chapter that expanded on your campus. They really came together. This was a group of 30 men that came together around community service. They didn't really have a flag to wave. They just knew that they wanted to do service. And that was the genesis of the organization. And I think that really sets them off on the right foot, knowing that that's what motivates them, that's what drives them. So what makes the students at Stockton so special? I'm just trying to figure out what's in the sauce, because I just don't see that on every campus.
I'm still trying to figure that out a little bit. No, being from New Jersey myself, and Southern New Jersey is, I would say, a little different. It's a lot different than Northern New Jersey. It's a slower pace down here. As you mentioned earlier, just people walking by and saying hi to you. Being from North Jersey, not necessarily all the time that happens. South Jersey, now that I'm down here working and living, I see that a lot more, that community. But so a lot of our students come to Stockton having this understanding that serving others is important, I think. I think we're just, recruiting students who have that mindset, that they've been helped in some way before in their lives and they want to give back themselves. When I talk to students about service, it has less to do with numbers of hours and more to do with the impacts they're having. I think a lot of my students who are doing a lot of service get very excited about, we got to do this, have this opportunity today. And, we tutored middle school kids at the Pleasantville Middle School. And, it's that face-to-face impacts that I think they really thrive on and they get excited about. And it just grows from there organically. Because they're from these communities and they get that, and they had those experiences when they were younger, and they just want to continue that on their end. And that's really wonderful to see, because that's really what service is about. It's having an understanding that we all as a community need to help each other, to serve each other. And, even though, yes, we collect, what are your service hours for the year? The impact is more important, and they understand that too. And I have them do reflection and, tell me about your service activities that you did this year and why were they meaningful and how are you actually teaching your new members to have an appreciation for serving others and want to serve. And my students know the number at the end of the year is not as meaningful as the actual work they did. And I think that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. In regards to fighting stereotypes of fraternities and sororities, because I know you said that, I think a lot of that comes naturally to them because they are great students and great chapters, and they're not exhibiting a lot of those behaviors a lot of the time that people might unfairly associate with Greeks. So I think they take the mantra of do what you say you will do very seriously at Stockton. And, for my students in particular, they know that I like to say that a lot. So I think that I put that in their heads. And I think that's really important. A big part of fighting stereotypes at Stockton has actually been from their fight to distance themselves from underground organizations that have popped up here. They want other students and faculty, staff, and the community to know that the behaviors that they see in these underground organizations, what these organizations stand for, and their behaviors are not what our fraternity and sorority community stand for. So I think a part of that has been that stance, which has been really important because they're proud of their accomplishments and what they do as a community, and they don't want underground organizations that they don't support or believe in. They don't want students affiliated with those groups at all. They don't want anything to do with that. And I think that's made them, understand more that we need to show people what it is that we do and what we stand for, and that's not it. So
yeah, do what you say you're going to do. I think that's why every fraternity and sorority headquarters in the nation wants a presence on your campus, because your students are just amazing, and I think you're blessed to be able to work with that kind of a student population. I also know that you're on the first gen student campus committee at Stockton. And it seems to me that fraternities and sororities could be an excellent place for first-gen students, because first-gen students are looking for a place they can call home. They want a big support network. I think that's something that they're very familiar with in order to ensure their success. So what can fraternities and sororities do in order to be more appealing to first-gen students, which is a growing demographic among all higher education campuses?
So I 100% agree with that analysis in regards to fraternities and sororities being important, and they can do a lot for first generation students. I think joining a fraternity or sorority your first year as a college student in particular can be a great way to have upperclassmen that you can confide in and help show you the ropes. Greek litter organizations are a big support network, as you said, and while schools like Stockton have a lot to offer students and are intentional and are focused with communities like first generation students, obviously having this community, and we're doing some very specific work on that, that you can't discount the peer-to-peer connection and how that's a key to student success. So I think where fraternities and sororities can be very successful there in both recruitment, but obviously supporting first generation students, is they are that peer-to-peer support network. I mean, that's what fraternities and sororities are about. So I think in regards to what they can specifically do to be more appealing to first-gen students is to put themselves in their shoes, which I'm sure a lot of them have been. Stockton, for instance, 50% of our students are first generation, 50%. So that's a pretty high number. But that also means our fraternity and sorority community, probably close to 50% of them are first generation students as well. So they get it. So putting themselves in those incoming students' shoes and thinking about, what was it that I struggled with as an incoming student, especially since my parents didn't go to school. And I have no one at home to really guide me as to what this is gonna to be like, is to have those connections with those upperclassmen. So, if the Greek community can be an olive branch for incoming first generation students, those students will in turn be more likely to join Greek organizations because of the relationships they built. So I think it's a win-win situation for everyone. And I think fraternities and sororities can be great allies for for us as professionals at a university to support our first generation students.
Yep, you perfectly nailed it. I mean, it is a win-win situation for the fraternities and sororities, opportunities for them to grow, and it's certainly a win-win situation for the university where they get engagement, and ultimately that's what they want, to make sure that they graduate, that they stay and graduate 4 years later. I want to talk about your presentation. You have an excellent presentation for college students called Real Men Don't Cry and Other Lies They Told Me. And this is all about healthy masculinity, a very important discussion today, as we know. And I think fraternities are a great place for men to have honest conversations with other men on this topic on college campuses. I don't know where else they would go to have a conversation like this. And that's one of the reasons why I think fraternities are so important and so relevant today. I know for myself, growing up, I was always taught to be tough by my parents and other people that were around me when I was a little child. And I was really taught not to show emotion externally. If I, hurt my leg or whatever, I was climbing a tree and I fell down. These are the types of things that I was taught to not show emotion. And I'm sure that's fairly common for other men as well. So what are the consequences of that on our campus communities and on men themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this conversation on healthy masculinity is important to me, because I truly feel a lot of expectations that society have on men has hurt a lot of us. And a lot of the time we don't see that or understand that. So sometimes we have to have this conversation to even understand that. So a lot of men, I think, that are skeptical of this conversation, I understand their skepticism, right? So it kind of starts there. But as you said, we're taught to hide our emotions. As my program title suggests, we're told as men, as boys, that we shouldn't cry, that this is somehow wimpy or emasculating, that only girls should cry. We're supposed to have this tough exterior, not show emotion. And if we do show emotion, the only acceptable one is anger or aggression, or, because of this, we as men don't know how to talk to one another. We don't know how to communicate to one another. It's hard for a lot of us to open up. The traditional view of what a man should be also sets us up for a lot of unattainable standards that very few men can actually meet, therefore causing stress in much of the male population. And we don't talk about that enough, and because it's hard for us to talk about. So the point of me doing this program is to help men open up and start this conversation and start this dialogue. Another thing I always think about in particular, because I think about this regarding my own life, even if there is another man that you're close with, a best friend, for instance, simply hugging them for a lot of men is a foreign concept. And if we do hug them, it's kind of this bro-y handshake with a pat on the back thing. A lot of that is because I think two heterosexual men giving each other a real hug is somehow considered, gay or effeminate. It's not associated with the traditional, view of what a, straight cisgender male is supposed to be. It's not considered normal. So my question is why? And how do these social constructs hurt us? Because I think that does hurt us. And that is why that's what my program is really trying to answer, is to have those conversations and ask those questions. And how can we get past that and be our authentic selves? So in terms of what the consequences exists for college campuses, our college men are not able to be their authentic selves. They're confused, they're depressed. I think this explains a lot of our suicide rates, our alcohol and drug abuse problems on college campuses. Men feel this need to gain control, to take back control. They assault women. They haze their new members, bringing it back to fraternity and sorority life, right? We see issues of sexual assault and hazing within fraternities and sororities. I think a lot of this has to do with this conversation on healthy masculinity and what traditional masculinity looks like, and how there's a disconnect there. And then from a college campus to really think about this as something important beyond all those things is, in terms of retention, we're losing men. we're losing men on our campuses. They're not graduating in 4 years, 6 years, or at all. And I think those are important things we need to think about as reasons why, reasons why we're seeing alcohol abuse, reasons why we're seeing sexual assault problems, right? I think a lot of it comes down to the issues that men are having internally about their identity and who they are. And this is what this conversation is really about, is how we can help solve that problem and become a healthier society, become healthier men, to reduce mental health issues, to reduce all these things we were just talking about. And that's what this program is about.
Yeah, I think it's excellent that you're doing it, and you're the perfect person to lead the charge on that. I think you're right. There are a lot of men out there that are skeptical when you start talking to them about a healthy masculinity talk. But the reality is, I think none of us can deny the suicide rates that are going up every single year. I saw it as a leader of college men, and certainly the alcohol and drug abuse rates climbing, all of these things. We're seeing something here, right? We all agree that there is an issue here, and we have to try to come to the root of it. And many times, if, let's say, a male on a college campus is abusing alcohol or drugs, there's a root cause of that. What are they trying to hide? What are they not able to express to others? And they're covering it up with alcohol or drug abuse, or we see a suicide or something like that because they can't talk to others. So I think we just have to agree that there's a problem here, and we have to figure out what is the root cause. And I think you're really going to uncover a lot of that with this talk on healthy masculinity. And another reason why I'm such an advocate for fraternity is because I think it's so necessary to have a place where you feel comfortable to talk to other men about all of these issues, that you're not going to be judged. And a fraternity is a perfect place to do that because you're very insulated, and there's certainly that trust amongst all the members, and you feel comfortable talking about these things, where I might not feel comfortable doing that in public to other people that are not in my organization. So the other thing I wanted to talk about too with you is that women organizations, and also culturally based organizations, I know that that's a critical piece of your community at Stockton being so strong. Your Greek community reflects the makeup of the student body at Stockton. So I'm talking about historically Latinx, Black, Southeast Asian, Jewish students, and your strength at Stockton is your diversity. So how do all of these groups work so well together across all the different councils?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about our strength being our diversity, and I always make that point, and that's first and foremost one of the things that I stress within our community. I would not be able, as a professional, to say we actually had a thriving, successful fraternity and sorority community unless it truly reflected the actual makeup of the student body, right? Because ultimately, I think that's one of the goals. And while we still have work to do, I think any campus still has work to do in this area. It's been important for me to ensure that every student on this campus has an opportunity to join a fraternal organization that reflects their identity, that reflects their needs, what they want out of an organization, a space that feels home, a space for them that feels comfortable, with their identity. And I think that's extremely important. And that goes back to what I was saying before about why of this, the 6 years I've been here, we've brought 8 organizations on campus. Half of them have been culturally based organizations, right? A multicultural Southeast Asian organization, a Latina sorority. It's important to ensure that if students are coming to me and have these needs and want to start a new organization, I'm going to try to do my best to not have any barriers in the way and to support them in doing that. And I think that's extremely important. And beyond just the addition of the new culturally based organizations we have on our campus, I'm proud to say that if you do look at the makeup of our IFC and Panhellenic organizations, they do, for the most part, reflect the diversity, the racial diversity of the campus community. And that's good to see too. Obviously, that's what we want out of our organization. While we're on a campus of approximately 8,700 undergrads, we have 28 active chapters right now. Our campus is not physically huge. We're in the Pine Barrens on a beautiful campus. If you ever get to visit Stockton, you'll see. You drive in, you're kind of driving a mile through nothing but trees, it's really beautiful. We're in the middle of the woods. We have a couple lakes on campus, really beautiful. So while our campus is technically very large, because of that, the actual physical, body of our campus, where our buildings are, our residence halls are, is actually pretty small in the middle. That being said, being a physically small campus, our organizations are always programming side by side. They see each other constantly, always doing programs in the campus center together. So I think because of that, they've grown relationships just simply by proximity. And again, we're in New Jersey, which is so culturally diverse, and they're used to that because most of our students are from New Jersey, that it's not, it's not weird or uncommon to see an IFC organization partnering with a Latinx fraternity, because, they came up together and they just have that support for one another, and they genuinely want to work together. Because they're friends, right? There's not much more to think about it than that. And I think Stockton fraternities and sororities also have this mentality that we're all in this together, that we're one community, and I think they get that. And I think, back to a previous point from a previous question, I think some of that also does come from, outside criticism of fraternities and sororities. So they kind of band together a lot of the time. But at the end of the day, it's really genuine. The support, they support each other because they're all trying to do the same thing. And because of that, they know that, let's collaborate on this program. We both want to do a program to support, this philanthropy. So we might as well do it together. How great would that be? So a lot of it just happens naturally. And it's really wonderful to see. And that definitely is one of the strengths that we have as a fraternity and sorority community.
I love it. It's beautiful. You also serve as the national treasurer for Phi Mu Delta Fraternity. So how is your lens a little bit different, since you sit both on the board of a national fraternity and also you are a campus-based professional? So how does that work?
Yeah, so it's funny too, because I told you earlier, I never wanted to join a fraternity when I started going to college when I was younger. So I went from this militantly anti-fraternity, this is not something I'd ever do, to now serving I think it's my third term on the national board for Phi Mu Delta. So it's kind of funny, but so in my third term, I've now served in 3 different roles too. So and then a few volunteer positions outside of that, doing stuff for the fraternity. So I think being a campus-based advisor and a national board member has probably been the main reason the fact that I do both is probably the main reason why I find a lot of success in both, because they kind of guide my practice, having that understanding of both sides. So I have that dual understanding that I can bring to both tables. One helps me guide the practice in the other. At the end of the day, both are the same in that we want the same things, right? We want successful chapters. We want healthy chapters that are doing the right things and, are growing our membership. We want engaged students. So that's where we see similarities on both sides. The main difference, I would say, that I see is from a national fraternity perspective. On that end, it's different because I have to think from a business standpoint, right? I currently serve as national treasurer, so from that standpoint, I definitely see a lot of difference because I'm looking at numbers and the money part is extremely important because we need that to have a successful organization and do the things we need to do. There's definitely a difference between advising chapters in my office, advising a chapter president one-on-one, face-to-face, than sitting, at a board table with other alumni and making more macro level decisions for the entire fraternity, and maybe be only face-to-face with undergrads in my fraternity a couple times a year, as opposed to, on a daily basis in my office with my job. So those are the main differences I see, but I think the benefit that I have definitely is just being able to understand both perspectives. And I hope anyway, that within my job at Stockton as fraternity and sorority advisor on campus, that when I work and communicate with national fraternities and sororities and I'm on the phone with them, that, you know, how I work with them through that lens, I hope that they feel good about working with me, that I have that understanding, and I know what, you know, what their concerns are on their side and vice versa. So I think that's really been beneficial to my work.
For sure. So, you know, we love eating good food here at Fraternity Foodie. So let's assume I end up in Southern New Jersey. Where should I go to eat? What should I order there in Southern New Jersey?
Sure. So I was thinking long and hard about this question because I knew it would end with this. And I think being in New Jersey, it would be really easy to start talking about pizza, but I'm not going to do that. Because that'll also set off a lot of people into arguments about what's the better pizza places. Because, as you know, if you live in New Jersey, that's a very contentious, topic. So what I'm going to go with actually is more than anything in the world, I'm kind of like Ron Swanson. I could eat breakfast 3 times a day if I could. So I wanted to share, there's this wonderful little place in Galloway, right down the street from Stockton, and it's called Shays Cafe and Bakery. I've been eating there since day one, since I moved down here and found out about the place. If you go into Shays, it looks like a typical little restaurant, cafe, diner. It doesn't look like anything special, to be honest with you. The food is some of the best breakfast food I've ever had in my life. So if you go to Shays in Galloway, this is what you need to try. I'm going to give you 2 options here, right? You can't order regular food there. If you're going to go there and just order scrambled eggs and bacon, you can do that anywhere. The things you need to try are the bruschetta omelet, right? So if you like omelets and you like bruschetta, I don't know who doesn't like bruschetta. I think bruschetta is delicious. But they make a phenomenal bruschetta omelet. So if you're into eggs, that's what you go for. If you want something more decadent and you like pancakes, when I say decadent, I mean decadent, all right? You're going to have sugar overload a little bit, but you need to try their cinnamon swirl pancakes. A lot of places do cinnamon swirl pancakes. I just had cinnamon swirl pancakes at another place yesterday. Nowhere near as good. I had to try them to compare. Nowhere near as good. So go to Shays, bruschetta omelet, cinnamon swirl pancakes. Those are my 2 options.
Sounds beautiful. I want the bruschetta omelet. I'm an egg guy, so that sounds fantastic to me. You really can't go wrong. I love how you shied away from the pizza conversation because you didn't want to get into any political debate. You're like, I'm just not even going to talk about that because somebody's going to call me out and say I'm wrong about my pizza choice. So that's really, really good.
Yeah.
That's good. So if any of our listeners, they want to contact you to talk a little bit more about some of the programs that you offer on other college campuses as a speaker, or maybe they just want some advice on some programs in order to improve their Greek community the same way that you've built up at Stockton, how can they reach you? How can they connect with you?
Sure. Well, if you want to reach out to me and just connect, I'm on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. My handle is JB Thompson, PMD for Phi Mu Delta. Very proud brother. But I will also be starting to speak this fall for Greek University. So please reach out to Mike in Greek University. And I'd love to talk to you about options for your campus.
That sounds really good. We're actually putting up a page today, so that way you can actually contact Joe through the website at Greek University. So feel free to check that out. Very excited to have him on the team. And I got to tell you, Joe, I mean, your students absolutely love you at Stockton. I know the brothers of PMD, they are huge fans of yours all over the country. And I'm a huge fan of yours. I think you've made me a better professional. Just in our short conversations that we've had over the years, you've really kind of framed up what it is that I bring to college campuses. So I'm really grateful for our friendship. I want you to know that. I want you to know that you mean so much to so many students, not just there in New Jersey, but really all over. And so I appreciate all your contributions, and I just can't wait for the next step. I think the next step, you speaking on college campuses all across the country, as they get to know you, they're going to love you too. So I just can't wait to see what all of that looks like in the future. I'm proud to know you, and thank you for everything that you do. So
I appreciate everything you just said, and thank you very much for that.
yes, of course, of course. It's my pleasure. And I know others feel the same. So I'm just speaking on behalf of literally lines and lines of PMD brothers and other students there at Stockton. So I'm just their vehicle to get you that message. So anyway, so thank you so much, Joe, for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you to the listeners for staying with us. This is now episode number 23. So we're super excited about growing the number on the podcast. Please share this with others if you think would love to hear more about the success at Stockton. And please let us know if you're interested in bringing Joe to your campus. Thanks so much for your time today. Bye for now.